Why did a widowed cowboy turn his wagon around for the woman an entire town had left sitting in the cold? The train shrieked away, steel wheels hammering the rails. Clara Bennett sat rigid on the freezing platform, one suitcase at her boots and $3.40 in her purse. Snow stung her cheeks. Then wagon wheels stopped behind her. A cowboy cleared the seat beside him and smiled. "I saved you a seat." But why had he come back? "Tell me what you would do." The train left Clara Bennett standing in its smoke. For a few seconds, the whole platform at Red Willow seemed to disappear behind steam. Then the November wind pushed the gray cloud apart, and the little Montana station came back into view piece by piece. A freight wagon waited beside the road. Two ranch hands were tying down sacks of flour. A woman in a brown bonnet hurried into the arms of an older man. Someone laughed near the baggage cart. Clara stood beside one worn leather suitcase and searched every face. No Edward Hayes. She told herself he might be late. The road into town was muddy from an early freeze and thaw. A wagon could lose a wheel. A horse could throw a shoe. Ranch work did not obey railroad schedules. So she waited. She had dressed carefully that morning. Dark traveling skirt. Cream blouse buttoned high at the throat. Her best coat. She had pinned her hair twice because the first time had not looked quite right. Edward had once written that he imagined recognizing her immediately. Clara had carried that sentence across hundreds of miles. 10 minutes passed, then 20. Passengers disappeared until nobody remained except railroad men and a tall cowboy loading feed sacks into a wagon near the freight shed. Clara looked down the road again. Still nobody. The station agent finally stepped outside, carrying a ledger beneath one arm. "Miss Bennett?" Relief came so quickly she almost smiled. "Yes." "Clara Bennett. I'm expecting Edward Hayes." The agent stopped. It was the pause that frightened her. Not his face, not his words. That pause. He lowered the ledger. "You were never supposed to arrive." Clara stared at him. "I beg your pardon?" The agent shifted his weight. "Hayes took a wife October 14th. The sounds around Clara seemed to move farther away. A harness buckle, a horse stamping, the ticking of the station clock through the open door. "He what?" "Married a woman from Helena. 3 weeks ago." Clara's gloved fingers tightened around the handle of her suitcase. "There must be some mistake. I don't believe there is." "He bought my ticket." The agent said nothing. He knew what train I was taking. I expect he did. He wrote to me 6 months. That made the man look away. Clara reached into her coat and pulled out a folded letter. She opened it carefully, although she already knew every line. Edward had written about the ranch, about winter preparations, about the room he intended to make ready for her. At the bottom were 4 words. "With all my heart." The paper did not change because she needed it to. Clara folded it along the same creases and returned it to her coat. "When did you say he married?" "October 14th. Her last letter from Edward had been dated October 19th. 5 days afterward. Clara lifted her eyes. The agent understood. His face tightened. "I'm sorry, Miss Bennett." She nodded once. There was nothing useful to say. By 5:30, Red Willow Station had emptied. Clara sat on the end of the platform bench with her suitcase between her boots and counted her money inside one glove. $3, 2 dimes, 4 nickels. $3.40. She counted again. The number remained the same. Her room in Cheyenne was gone. She had surrendered it before boarding the train. Her younger sister had barely enough space and money for herself. Clara had promised to write once she was settled. Settled. She almost laughed. Instead, she closed her hand around the coins. The station agent carried the lamp in from the waiting room. "Closing up, Miss Bennett." Clara stood. "Of course." He hesitated as though considering another apology. Perhaps he realized apologies did not buy supper or a bed. "There's a hotel down Main." "How much?" $1.25. Clara glanced at her suitcase. "Thank you." The agent locked the station behind her. Darkness gathered quickly in the valley. Snow had begun moving down from the mountains, not yet falling hard, just thin white flecks drifting through the lamplight. Clara sat again. Across the freight yard, the cowboy had finished loading his wagon. She had noticed him earlier without meaning to. Tall, lean, dark coat worn pale at the elbows. He worked without calling for help, lifting feed sacks and checking each rope twice before tightening the next. Now he climbed onto the wagon. Clara turned away. The wagon rolled toward the road. Good. She did not want anyone's pity, especially not tonight. The wheels grew quieter, then stopped. Clara looked up. Farther down the road, the cowboy sat motionless on the wagon bench. A moment later, he turned the horse around. Clara watched him come back. He stopped several yards from the platform and climbed down. He removed his hat before approaching. "Miss." Clara straightened. "Sir." "Station's closed." "I noticed." His mouth moved slightly. Not quite amusement. "Snow's coming harder." "I noticed that too." He nodded. Apparently he had expected no other answer. "My name's Nathan Cole. Ranch is 4 miles north." Clara waited. "I've got a spare room." Her shoulders stiffened. "No, thank you." "All right." That surprised her. No persuasion, no offended pride. Nathan put his hat back on and turned toward his wagon. Clara watched him take 3 steps. He stopped. Without facing her, he said, "Room has its own door. I'll bring you back into town tomorrow whenever you ask." Clara said nothing. "You don't owe me anything for tonight." Still nothing. Nathan looked toward the mountains. "Cold gets mean after dark out here." Then he walked back to his wagon. Clara looked down at her suitcase. $3.40. She looked toward Main Street. Yellow windows, unknown rooms, unknown men, unknown prices. Then toward Nathan Cole. He was moving feed sacks, not unloading them, moving them sideways. Clara frowned. He shifted the final sack, brushed grain dust from the wagon bench, and looked toward her. For the first time, the grave expression softened. "Just a little. I saved you a seat." Something about those words nearly undid her. Not because they were grand, because they weren't. Edward Hayes had written pages about forever. Nathan Cole had moved 3 sacks of feed. Clara picked up her suitcase. Nathan came forward, but stopped before reaching for it. "May I?" She studied him, then released the handle. "Yes." He put the suitcase behind the bench, secured it beneath the canvas, and waited until Clara climbed aboard before taking his own place. The wagon started north. For nearly a mile, Nathan asked her nothing. That silence became the first kindness Clara trusted. Eventually, she said, "Edward Hayes sent for me." Nathan kept his eyes on the road. "I know." She turned. "The station agent told you?" "He talks loud." Despite herself, Clara almost smiled. "He wrote for 6 months." Nathan nodded. "Bought my ticket." Another nod. His last letter said he was preparing the house. Nathan's jaw tightened. He married someone else before he mailed it. This time, Nathan looked at her, only briefly. "I'm sorry." That was all. No advice. No question about how an educated woman could believe a stranger's letters. Clara looked toward the mountains. "I have $3.40. Nathan adjusted the reins. "You don't have to tell me what you've got. I want you to understand. I'm not asking for charity. I understand. I can work. I believe you. You don't know me." "No." The answer was so plain she looked at him again. Nathan's eyes remained on the road. After another long stretch, he said, "My wife was named Ellen." Clara waited. "She and our daughter died 6 winters ago." The wheels rolled over frozen ruts. "I was checking the far pasture when a storm came through faster than expected." His voice did not change. "When I got home, there wasn't anything left I could fix." Clara lowered her eyes. "I'm sorry." Nathan nodded once. "I kept the ranch because work doesn't ask whether you're ready for morning." Snow whispered against the wagon canvas. After a while, Clara understood why he had told her. Not to compare grief. To explain recognition. The coal ranch appeared after dark. A weathered house tucked beneath a low ridge, barn leaning into the wind, fences running black across the snow-dusted pasture. Inside, the house was clean and terribly still. 2 chairs stood at the kitchen table, but only one showed regular wear. Nathan poured coffee into 2 heavy cups. Clara wrapped her fingers around hers. It was strong enough to wake the dead. She took another sip anyway. "The spare room?" she asked. Nathan showed her. Narrow bed, washstand, cracked mirror, rag rug. Clara inspected the door. "Does it lock?" Nathan looked at the latch. "No." Her stomach tightened. Then he said, "Give me 10 minutes." He disappeared. A moment later, she heard tools being moved in the shed, then hammer blows. Nathan returned carrying an iron latch, screws, and a small key. He worked without conversation. When he finished, he shut the door, locked it, unlocked it, then handed Clara the key. "There." She looked from the key to him. "Thank you." "Good night, Miss Bennett." That was all. Behind the locked door, Clara sat on the edge of the bed. She removed Edward's letter with all my heart. For one hot second, she wanted to tear it apart. Instead, she folded it. Not because it deserved preserving, because she was not finished understanding the man who had written it. She placed it in her suitcase and turned the key in the new lock. For the first time that day, Clara slept. Before dawn, she woke to the smell of coffee and salt pork. Nathan was already at the stove when she entered the kitchen. He pointed toward the coffee pot. She poured herself a cup. They ate mostly in silence. Then Nathan set down his fork. "What do you need?" Clara looked at him. Not "where will you go?" Not "what can you give me?" "What do you need?" "Work," she said. "Enough money to decide what comes next." Nathan glanced toward the far end of the table. Receipts were stacked beneath an old cattle catalog. Feed invoices stuck from a wooden box. A ledger lay open with 3 months of entries apparently missing. Clara followed his eyes. "How do you keep your accounts?" Nathan looked mildly uncomfortable. "Mostly in my head." Clara stared at him. "That bad?" "Worse." For the first time, she smiled. Nathan almost did too. Outside, snow settled over the ranch. Inside, beneath the kitchen lamp, Clara pulled the nearest stack of receipts toward her. Neither of them knew it yet. But Nathan Cole had not merely saved her a seat. He had made room. And Clara Bennett was about to discover there was a difference. Nathan's offer came after breakfast. "The room stays yours. Meals too. $2 a week." Clara looked from him to the disorder at the far end of the kitchen table. For what work? House needs tending. Supplies need keeping. He glanced at the receipts with visible dislike. And apparently I need someone to tell me whether I'm making money. Are you? Nathan considered that. I own cattle. That wasn't my question. His mouth twitched. Clara noticed. $2 is generous. Fair, Nathan said. Different thing. That settled it. She agreed to stay until she had enough money to choose what came next. The first week taught Clara that Nathan Cole could judge a horse's soreness from 20 feet away and somehow lose 3 feed invoices while sitting at the table where he had placed them. His bookkeeping was not dishonest. It was worse. It was hopeful. Receipts lived in coat pockets, drawers, tobacco tins, and once inside an old seed catalog. Clara sorted everything by date. Feed, veterinary supplies, fence wire, seed, freight charges, cattle sales. By the third evening, she had numbers. By the fourth, she had a problem. How long have those cattle been in the east pasture? Nathan looked up from repairing a bridle near the stove. Since September. You're losing money on them. He stopped working. No, I'm not. Clara turned the ledger around. You spent $11.60 supplementing their feed last month. Grass is poor over there. Exactly. He came to the table. She showed him the figures. The north pasture costs you nothing except moving them. Better grass. Better shelter from the wind. If their weight improves, you reduce purchased feed and improve sale value. Nathan studied the page. You got all that from receipts? I got it from your receipts. He remained unconvinced. Clara closed the ledger. They're your cattle. That ended the argument more effectively than pushing would have. The next morning, Nathan moved them north. 2 weeks later, he took Clara to the fence at sundown. The cattle stood broadside in the fading light, coats thicker, bodies already beginning to fill. You were right. The numbers were right. Nathan looked at her. You always do that? Do what? Refuse credit. Clara tucked her gloved hands into her coat. I've known enough people who take credit they haven't earned. I don't intend to become one. That evening she found a new entry in the household book. Feed savings. Underneath, in Nathan's square handwriting, he had recorded Clara's agreed share for the extra accounting work. Not a gift, not charity, payment. She ran one finger beneath the line and said nothing. Nathan was learning her language. She was learning his. He taught her to drive the smaller wagon on the road between the barn and north gate. Don't fight the reins. The horse is going toward the ditch. He knows where the ditch is. Then why is he headed for it? Nathan looked at the brown gelding. Because Bishop has a sense of humor. Clara turned toward him. Horses don't have senses of humor. Bishop immediately stopped to steal a mouthful of dry grass from beside the ditch. Nathan's eyes warmed. Clara narrowed hers. You planned that. I don't control the horse. You looked remarkably pleased for an innocent man. A laugh almost escaped him. Almost. Those nearly forgotten sounds became part of the ranch. Coffee grinding before sunrise. Boots on the porch. The scrape of Clara's pen after supper. Nathan splitting wood behind the shed. Bishop snorting whenever Clara approached with the harness. Nothing dramatic happened between them. That was why Clara began trusting it. One afternoon she found the garden. It lay behind the kitchen, enclosed by a sagging fence. Dead stalks stood beneath old snow. A rusted hoe leaned against the house. You used to plant here? Nathan was carrying kindling. Ellen did. Clara crouched and broke the crusted soil with her fingers. You could use it again. Nathan looked across the empty beds. Didn't see much sense. In vegetables? In planting something you have to wait for. Clara looked up. Nathan seemed to realize how much he had said. He shifted the wood in his arms. Clara returned her attention to the soil. Well, she said, I intend to be eating onions next summer whether you're philosophical about them or not. He walked away. Near the south wall, she found another bed buried beneath dead leaves. Irises, Nathan said later. Ellen's? Yes. Do they still bloom? They used to. Clara brushed leaves from one patch. I thought about digging them out. Her hand stopped. Why? Nathan stood beside the porch post. Habit, I suppose. Grief gets into habits. Clara rose. Don't. That was all she said. The next morning, the dead leaves had been cleared from the entire bed. Neither mentioned it. Red Willow noticed Clara long before Clara began considering herself part of Red Willow. Mrs. Geedy arrived carrying preserves. She sat at Nathan's kitchen table, accepted coffee, inspected the curtains, the ledgers, Clara's sewing basket, and probably Clara herself with equal attention. We heard someone was staying out here. News travels quickly. Small town. So I've learned. Mrs. Geedy stirred her coffee. And how long will you be staying? As long as the arrangement remains useful to both of us. Of course. The spoon continued circling. Edward Hayes is considered a very respectable man. Clara's cup stopped halfway to her mouth. Is he? Well respected. Nathan entered as Mrs. Geedy was leaving. He waited until her wagon had crossed the gate. What did she want? To determine whether I'm respectable. Nathan removed his gloves. And? She didn't issue a certificate. That nearly earned another smile. Clara began gathering the cups. She says Edward Hayes is well respected. Nathan's expression changed. He has money. Clara waited. Around here, Nathan said, folks confuse that with respect. 3 weeks after Clara's arrival, she drove Bishop into Red Willow alone. She was comparing prices on flour when a man's voice spoke behind her. Clara. She knew it before she turned. Edward Hayes wore a dark wool coat and polished boots. His hair was neatly trimmed. He looked exactly like his letters had sounded. Careful. Controlled. Respectable. Mr. Hayes. His smile was practiced. I heard you'd arrived. You knew I was arriving before I did. His smile faltered. I owe you an apology. You owe me considerably more than that. A clerk at the far counter suddenly became fascinated with a crate of lamp chimneys. Edward lowered his voice. Circumstances changed. You married someone else. It was complicated. No. It was a decision. His eyes hardened slightly. Clara continued. You made it. Then you decided I wasn't important enough to tell. For 1 second, Edward Hayes stopped pretending to be sorry. Then the pleasant expression returned. I understand you've found employment with Nathan Cole. Clara felt something shift inside her. Not pain. Attention. How do you know that? Red Willow is small, so Mrs. Geedy keeps reminding me. Edward stepped nearer. If Nathan's circumstances become unsuitable, I could arrange something better. His circumstances suit me. You handle his books, don't you? Now Clara became very still. Edward smiled again. Give Nathan my regards. He walked away. Clara remained beside the flour barrel, listening to his boots cross the wooden floor. Edward had known too much. Nathan's reaction that evening told her the rest. He stood beside the kitchen table while Clara described the encounter. When she repeated Edward's final words, Nathan stopped removing his gloves. He said that? Yes. Nathan sat. For a while he watched the lamp flame. Then he said, "Railroad surveyors came through last spring." Clara waited. "They're considering a spur through Red Willow Valley. And, if it comes, land near the corridor could triple." Clara looked toward the dark window. "Edward knows where they might build. He thinks he does. Been buying parcels for 2 years. Some under other names." "Your ranch?" "Likely corridor crosses near my north boundary." Clara understood before he finished. "He tried to buy you out." "Twice." "And after you refused?" Nathan leaned back. Feed orders started arriving late. Bank held deposits longer than usual. Credit got tighter. Nothing large enough to accuse anyone of. Clara looked at her ledger. The unexplained costs, the poor pasture, the shrinking margins. Pressure did not always look like a fist. Sometimes it looked like $8 here, 4 days there, one supplier suddenly apologizing for something he had never had trouble doing before. "Edward isn't waiting for you to sell," she said. Nathan looked at her. "He's making sure eventually you have to." The knock came the following morning. A bank messenger stood on the porch holding a leather satchel. "Notice for Nathan Cole." Clara took the envelope. Nathan opened it at the table. He read the first page. Then again. His face emptied. "What?" He handed it to her. The Red Willow County Bank was invoking a property risk clause. Nathan had missed no payments. He had violated no stated term. But because the ranch's assessed value had supposedly declined, the bank was demanding accelerated repayment. Clara read the deadline. Then she pulled Nathan's reassessment notice from the file she had organized 2 weeks earlier. The dates sat beside each other. Reassessment first, mortgage acceleration afterward. Too neat. Nathan stood at the window. "I can't pay that." Clara knew. She knew exactly how much money was in every account connected to the ranch. "If you can't, the note gets sold, or the property does." "To whom?" Nathan didn't answer. He didn't need to. Clara looked at Edward's letter lying inside her open suitcase across the room. "With all my heart." For months, she had believed Edward Hayes had merely discarded her. Now another possibility was taking shape. Maybe Clara's arrival had never mattered to him as a marriage at all. Maybe people were simply things Edward placed where they might become useful. Clara sat down. She pulled a fresh notebook from the drawer, opened to the first page, dipped her pen into the ink. Nathan turned from the window. "What are you doing?" Clara wrote the date of his reassessment at the top, then the date of the bank notice beneath it, finding out who else this happened to. Nathan looked at Clara across the kitchen table. The lamp burned between them. Outside, the first hard wind of December worried at the barn roof and pushed loose snow along the yard. "Where do you start?" Clara closed the notebook. "With people nobody important thinks to ask." That was how Mrs. Geedy became useful. Clara found her behind the feed store counter the next afternoon, weighing nails for a ranch hand. She waited until the customer left. "I need to ask you something." Mrs. Geedy looked pleased and suspicious at once. "About Edward Hayes? How many ranches has he bought in the last 2 years?" The woman's expression changed. She glanced toward the window. 7 that people know about." Clara pulled out her notebook. "Tell me about the first." Mrs. Geedy stared at the pencil. "You planning to write down everything I say?" "Only the useful parts." That earned her a chair. The Henderson place had gone first. A county reassessment lowered its value. Weeks later, the bank accelerated the mortgage. Edward appeared afterward with sympathy and a purchase offer. Margaret Price had suffered nearly the same sequence. The Carty brothers, too. Tom Waverley sold before the bank could call his note, but only after somebody convinced him his property was about to become worthless. Clara wrote until her fingers cramped. 3 days later, Ruth Henderson sat at Nathan's kitchen table. She was a tall woman with silver beginning at her temples and anger preserved with remarkable care. "I kept everything," Ruth said. She opened a cloth satchel. The kitchen table disappeared beneath paper. Assessment notices, bank correspondence, receipts, a purchase offer from Clearwater Land Holdings. Clara read the offer twice. When did Edward make this? 4 days after Holloway told us the bank wouldn't extend the mortgage. Clara checked the date printed at the bottom. The document had been prepared 12 days before the Hendersons approached Edward. Nathan leaned over her shoulder. He already had the sale papers ready. Yes. Ruth's mouth tightened. He knew we'd have nowhere else to go. Margaret Price brought another set of papers 2 evenings later. Then one of the Carty brothers arrived carrying documents tied together with baling twine. Different ranches, different amounts, same order, reduced assessment, financial pressure, accelerated note, purchase, and across several documents appeared the same notary. Aldous Cross, Helena. Clara circled the name. Nathan watched. Means something? Not yet. She circled it again. But repetition usually does. Clara wrote to Elias Marsh in Billings. She had found his name attached to a property dispute 3 years earlier, involving forced land sales. Her letter was 8 pages long and contained no accusation she could not connect to a document. Marsh came to Red Willow 11 days later. He was a compact man with a weather-darkened overcoat and a leather case polished smooth by travel. Clara expected him to spend an hour. He stayed 6. By evening, the kitchen smelled of coffee, lamp oil, and cold wool drying near the stove. Marsh arranged Clara's papers into rows. Henderson. Price, Carty, Cole. He tapped each stack. Same sequence. Yes. Same bank. Yes. Related purchasing companies. Yes. And Cross appears here, here, and here. Yes. Marsh sat back. You didn't collect a pile of papers, Miss Bennett. Clara waited. You found the pattern. Nathan looked at her. Clara looked down at the ledger. The pattern was already there. Most dangerous things are, Marsh said, until somebody notices. The first real mistake came 2 days later. Clara went after Mr. Albright. The county assessor's office occupied 2 cramped rooms behind the courthouse. A coal stove clicked near the wall. Maps hung from wooden pegs. Albright had signed Nathan's reassessment. Clara placed copies of 4 other reductions on his desk. You lowered every one of these properties shortly before the bank acted. Albright stiffened. I performed my duties. Using information supplied by whom? I don't discuss county business with unauthorized persons. You accepted false profitability reports. His chair scraped backward. You're accusing me of fraud. I am asking why the same thing happened repeatedly under your signature. No. You're accusing me. Clara realized too late that she had crossed from evidence into assumption. Albright gathered the papers. This meeting is finished. That night she told Nathan. She expected him to defend her. Instead, he asked, Do you know Albright was working with Hayes? Clara stared at him. The pattern, do you know? No. Then you went farther than your evidence. Her jaw tightened. You think I don't understand that now? I think you're angry. I am angry. So am I. Nathan put another piece of wood into the stove. But angry isn't the same as right. Clara hated the sentence because it was true. She stood at the kitchen window for a long while. Finally, she said, I made a mistake. Yes. She turned. That was all he offered. No softening, no false reassurance. What am I supposed to do with that? Nathan poured coffee. Go fix it. Clara stared at him. Then, against every intention, she laughed once. A small sound. Nathan looked relieved enough that she nearly laughed again. The following morning, she returned to Albright's office. I owe you an apology. He did not invite her to sit. Clara remained standing. I accused you of something I couldn't prove. That was wrong. Albright studied her. No excuse? No. A long pause. Then Clara placed one document on his desk. This is the report used to support Nathan Cole's reassessment. I am not asking who sent it. I'm asking whether you verified these figures independently. Albright read it. His face changed. Clara saw the exact moment suspicion entered. That isn't the copy I received. Now she said nothing. Albright opened a cabinet. 20 minutes later, two versions of the same report lay side by side. Someone had altered the numbers before the final county file was prepared. Albright sat very still. I signed this. You signed what you believed was accurate. His eyes lifted. And somebody counted on me not checking afterward. Clara nodded. By the time she left, Mr. Albright was no longer an enemy. He was frightened. And frightened men with filing cabinets sometimes became valuable witnesses. The case grew. So did the hours at Nathan's table. Some nights Clara worked until midnight. Nathan rarely understood the corporate papers, but he knew every fence line in Red Willow Valley. He knew who had leased pasture from whom, which creek changed course in wet years, and which supposedly worthless parcel controlled access to the northern road. She saw patterns on paper. He saw them on the ground. One night Clara rubbed her eyes and leaned closer to a deed. Without speaking, Nathan reached across the table and moved the lamp nearer her papers. Clara looked up. What? Nothing. He returned to repairing a harness buckle. Clara watched his hands for a moment, then went back to work. Later she asked, If we stop Hayes, what do you want this ranch to be? Nathan's hands stopped. Used to know. And now? He looked around the kitchen, at the ledgers, at Clara's sewing basket beside the stove, at 2 coffee cups instead of 1. Lately, he said, it feels worth keeping again. Clara lowered her eyes before he could see what that did to her. Edward attacked 3 days later. Not the case, Clara. The first rumor said she had been dismissed from the Cheyenne boarding house for theft. The second said she had arrived penniless and attached herself to Nathan. The third was uglier in its implication without ever needing to be spoken plainly. A lonely widower, a young woman living beneath his roof, a lawsuit against the man who had refused to marry her. Mrs. Geedy came to the ranch herself. He's telling people you're using Nathan. Clara's hand stopped over the ledger. For money? For influence? Revenge? Whatever version suits the listener. Nathan heard another version directly from Edward. He returned from town near dusk, hung his coat, and stood beside the stove. Hayes approached me. Clara waited. He said you stole in Cheyenne. Said I ought to check your references before trusting you with my accounts. The room seemed to contract around her. And what did you say? Nathan looked at her. I told him I'd trust Clara Bennett's handshake before I'd trust his signed contract. She stared at him. You didn't ask whether it was true? No. That one word reached somewhere Edward's 6 months of letters never had. Clara looked down before Nathan could see too much. The next morning, Mrs. Geedy brought worse news. The story was spreading. Clara listened, then put on her coat. Where are you going? Community Hall. For what? to stop letting Edward choose the question. 31 people came that afternoon. Clara counted them because counting steadied her. Nathan wasn't there. Marsh wasn't there. She had asked neither for permission. She stood at the front beneath 2 smoky lamps with her ledger on the table. Then she told Red Willow the most humiliating truth first. Edward Hayes asked me to come west intending to marry him. Nobody moved. He bought my ticket. He wrote to me for 6 months. When I arrived, I learned he had married someone else 3 weeks earlier. A chair creaked. Clara continued. He now says everything I've discovered is revenge. She opened the ledger. So don't take my word for any of it. She read the dates. Henderson reassessment. Bank action. Purchase offer. Price reassessment. Bank action. Purchase. Cardi. Waverly. Cole. Clearwater Land Holdings. Aldous Cross. When she finished, the room was silent. He wants you deciding what kind of woman I am because he cannot explain what is written on these pages. Clara rested her hand on the ledger. Don't believe me because you feel sorry for me. Nobody applauded. Good. She had not come for applause. Look at the paper. Silence. Then a chair moved. Ruth Henderson stood. She carried her documents to the front and placed them beside Clara's ledger. My husband and I lost our ranch, she said. Margaret Price rose next. Then Tom Waverly. Then one of the Cardi brothers. 4 separate stacks of paper sat together beneath the lamps. For 2 years, Edward Hayes had depended on every family believing its misfortune belonged to them alone. Now the whole county could see the table. Nathan heard about the meeting after dark. He met Clara's wagon halfway home. His horse came out of the darkness beside Bishop, breath white in the cold. You went alone? Yes. You should have told me. You would have tried to stop me. Nathan shook his head. I would have come with you. Clara looked at him. The road stretched silver beneath a thin moon. I needed to know I could walk into that room myself. Nathan was quiet. Then he nodded. I understand. No lecture. No wounded pride. He simply turned his horse toward home. They rode side by side. Their shoulders did not touch. Their hands did not reach. But somewhere along that dark Montana road, Bishop drifted closer to Nathan's horse, and neither rider corrected him. Behind them, Red Willow was finally looking at the paper. Ahead of them, the kitchen lamp burned in the ranch window, and for the first time, Clara understood that being believed could feel almost as intimate as being loved. By morning, the meeting at the community hall had done something Edward Hayes had spent 2 years preventing. It made people compare stories. Tom Waverly arrived at Mrs. Giddy's feed store before breakfast, with an old receipt folded into quarters inside his coat. Clara found him there an hour later. I remembered the name, Tom said. What name? The fellow who was with the man who came about my land. Never thought much about him then. He pushed the receipt across the counter. Aldous Cross. Clara stopped. The Helena notary. The same name she had circled again and again. She sent a telegram to Elias Marsh before noon. His answer arrived that afternoon. Do not contact Cross. I will. Marsh came back to Red Willow 3 days later, carrying a leather case that looked heavier than before. He opened it at Nathan's kitchen table. Aldous Cross kept copies. Nathan leaned forward. Of what? Letters. Marsh laid down the first. Edward's name appeared at the bottom. Clara read slowly. Instructions about a property assessment. Another letter discussed timing with Holloway. A third referred to Clearwater Land Holdings acquiring a parcel before its owner could recover financially. Edward had hidden behind other men for years. Now his own handwriting connected the layers. "Why would Cross keep these?" Nathan asked. "Insurance," Marsh said. He knew what he was helping with wasn't clean. Men who know that tend to save something that might protect them later. And now? Now he's frightened enough to cooperate. Clara looked at the papers. "This goes beyond county court." "It does." Marsh had already contacted territorial authorities. For the first time, Edward could no longer depend on Red Willow remaining a closed room. His answer came quickly. A settlement offer arrived through Holloway. Nathan's mortgage would return to its original terms. The reassessment would disappear. The Hendersons and Margaret Price would receive partial compensation. Edward would admit nothing. Nathan read the offer twice. "This saves the ranch." Clara said nothing. That was what made the offer dangerous. It was not worthless. It offered Nathan the one thing he had spent months trying to protect. He walked outside. Clara followed after several minutes and found him at the north fence looking across the valley. Snow lay in the low ground. Cattle moved slowly beyond the creek. "If we refuse," Nathan said, "there's still a chance this goes wrong." "Yes. And if it does, I could lose the place." "Yes." He looked at her. "What would you do if this were your ranch?" Clara tucked her hands into her coat pockets. "I'd want someone to remind me it isn't only my ranch anymore." Nathan frowned. The Hendersons lost theirs. Margaret Price lost hers. The Cardys were pushed. Waverly was frightened into selling. She looked toward the mountains. "If we take enough to save ourselves, Edward learns the price of making us quiet." Nathan remained at the fence long after Clara returned inside. The following morning, he sat across from her at breakfast. "Right, Marsh?" Clara waited. "Tell him no." She picked up her pen. "Together?" Nathan nodded. "Together." Edward stopped pretending after that. He cornered Nathan at the hardware store and mentioned Judge Heron Puit. 15 years of friendship," Edward said. "Nothing directly improper. Nothing a man could carry into court as proof." "Just enough." When Nathan repeated it that evening, Clara closed the ledger. "He wants us thinking the courtroom belongs to him." "Maybe it does. Then we find a larger room." Marsh reached the same conclusion. Cross's correspondence gave him the means to move the matter beyond county influence. But before that happened, Nathan surprised Clara with something entirely different. He took her into Red Willow on a pale December morning and stopped beside an empty building on Main Street. 2 front windows, a narrow back room, a small iron stove, dust everywhere. Clara turned. "What is this? Been empty about a year. Why are you showing it to me?" Nathan pushed open the door. "You're good at accounts, documents, correspondence. People are already coming to you." Clara looked around. "You're talking about an office?" "Yes. For me, if you want it." Suspicion arrived immediately. "Nathan, I won't accept a building. I didn't offer you one." She looked at him. "You'd pay rent." That stopped her. "How much?" He named a modest figure. Clara narrowed her eyes. "Is that the actual rent?" "It's what the last tenant paid." "You own this building, don't you?" Nathan looked toward the window. She folded her arms. "Nathan." "Yes." Despite herself, Clara smiled. "And you expect me to pay?" "Every month." "Fair?" Now he smiled. Small, unmistakable. Different thing. Clara walked into the front room. She could see a desk beneath the window. Shelves along the wall. A place where someone frightened by a letter from a bank might sit down and have another person read it carefully. For once, the future did not arrive in someone else's handwriting. "I'll think about it." Nathan nodded. He did not ask for an answer. That mattered. Days later, Marsh brought word that Cross's cooperation was holding. That evening, Nathan sat unusually quiet at the kitchen table. Finally, he said, "Ellen." Clara looked up. It was the first time he had spoken his wife's name since telling Clara about her. "Ellen was funny," he said. "People always say the dead were kind. Or good. She was those things. But she was funny." His thumb moved along the rim of his coffee cup. "After she died, I stopped remembering that part first." Clara did not interrupt. "This ranch became something I maintained because I didn't know what else to do." He looked around the kitchen. "Then you came in here and started arguing about feed costs." Clara's mouth moved. "You moved my coffee tin. It was beside the flour. That made no sense. You planted onions. I intend to eat them. And somewhere in all that, this stopped feeling like a monument." His eyes met hers, started feeling like a home again. Clara's breath caught. She could have let the moment carry them somewhere easy. She didn't. "I opened an account at the bank." Nathan blinked. "In my name. I've saved enough for the office deposit and first month's rent." Understanding slowly changed his face. "I can leave your ranch now," Clara said. "If I choose." "Yes. I can support myself." "Yes." She held his gaze. "And I'm still here." Neither moved. "When this is finished," Clara said, "I want to talk about us." Nathan's hand tightened around his cup. "I've been waiting for that conversation." "Then keep waiting." A quiet laugh escaped him. This time he did not hide it. Edward made his last desperate move 4 mornings later. 3 riders came through the ranch gate shortly after noon. The man in front introduced himself as Gil Rohr and produced a folded document. "County seizure order." Nathan came from the barn as Clara read it. Her eyes stopped at the seal. Then the date. Then the signature block. "This isn't valid." Rohr frowned. "Judge signed it." "The seal is wrong." Nathan took the paper. His expression hardened. "This witness hasn't worked for the county since summer." Rohr looked from one of them to the other. Clara handed the document back. "And this date precedes the filing it's supposedly responding to." Nobody spoke. "If you attempt to seize property under a fraudulent document," Clara said evenly, "your name becomes part of the matter Marsh is already sending to territorial authorities." Rohr looked down at the paper. His confidence drained quickly. "I was told it was proper." "Then take it back to whoever told you." For several seconds, the only sound was a loose hinge knocking against the barn. Rohr folded the document. He mounted. The 3 men rode away. Nathan and Clara remained beside the porch. The ranch fell strangely silent after the hoofbeats faded. No victory, no celebration. Only the realization of how desperate Edward had become. Nathan looked at Clara. Then, after 3 months of careful distance, he reached for her hand. His fingers closed around hers. Warm, certain, nothing more. "Almost over," he said. Clara looked down at their joined hands, then back at him. Almost. Neither let go first. Within the week, territorial investigators arrived. Holloway began cooperating. Mr. Albright turned over his files. Judge Heron Puett recused himself once the matter moved beyond local control. Edward Hayes was formally served. And then, in the middle of all that noise, Clara received a letter that had nothing to do with him. It came from Billings. A widow named Alice Dormer had read about Clara's work. A creditor claimed Alice owed more than her husband's records showed. Could Miss Bennett examine the accounts? Clara read the letter twice beneath the kitchen lamp. Nathan came in carrying an armful of wood. What is it? Clara looked at the envelope, then toward Red Willow, where an empty office waited behind dusty windows. My first client. Nathan set the wood beside the stove. He looked at her for a moment. Then he quietly moved the lamp closer to her side of the table. Clara pulled out a clean sheet of paper. Outside, winter held the valley hard beneath snow. Inside, she dipped her pen. The fight that had nearly taken everything from them had done something Edward Hayes could never have intended. It had shown Clara Bennett what belonged to her. By January, her name was painted across the front window on Main Street. Clara Bennett, accounts and correspondence. Nathan had offered to help with the lettering. Clara hired a sign painter instead. Nathan said nothing about it. He repaired the stovepipe, planed the office door where it dragged against the floor, and replaced one cracked window latch. Then he put his tools back in the wagon and left Clara to decide where everything else belonged. Her first desk faced the street. Alice Dormer's papers occupied its first drawer. The creditor claiming money from Alice had counted the same freight charge twice and carried interest forward from a debt already settled by her late husband. Clara found both errors before supper on her second day. 3 letters later, the claim was reduced to what Alice actually owed. Alice paid it. Then she paid Clara. The coins lay in Clara's palm for a moment before she entered them in her own ledger. Not Nathan's money. Not Edward's passage money. Hers. By February, more letters appeared. A rancher needed a contract read. A widow wanted old receipts organized. Margaret Price brought in property papers tied with blue thread. Even Mrs. Geedy arrived one morning with 6 years of mercantile accounts and announced that she had always known Clara would make something of herself. Clara looked over the mountain of paper. Did you? Mrs. Geedy adjusted her hat. More or less. Clara smiled and charged her the regular rate. At the ranch, life became strangely ordinary. That was harder than fighting Edward. There had been comfort in urgency. Every morning once had brought another document, another witness, another reason for Nathan and Clara to sit beneath the kitchen lamp until midnight. Now some evenings Clara came home and there was nothing waiting except supper. Nathan checked cattle. Clara washed ink from her fingers. Wind rubbed bare cottonwood limbs against the roof. Sometimes neither spoke for 10 minutes, and still the silence held. One evening Nathan came through the door with mud dried to his boots and snow melting along his shoulders. Clara poured his coffee without asking. He sat down, noticed the papers beside her elbow, and moved the lamp closer. They both stopped. The gesture had become so familiar, neither had thought about it. Nathan looked at her. Clara looked at him. There was no Edward between them now. No frightened rancher waiting outside. No forged paper. Just Nathan's coffee, her ledger, the lamp, and the empty chair that had not been empty in months. I love you, Nathan said. Clara's hand went still around her pencil. He did not decorate the words. That was Nathan. 6 winters of grief had taught him that some things became smaller when a man tried too hard to explain them. Clara set down the pencil. I love you too. Nathan breathed once, slowly. Marry me. For the first time since Clara had known him, hope crossed his face before he could hide it. She wanted to say yes. That frightened her, so she said, Ask me when the irises come up. Nathan's expression changed. Not anger. Something closer to hurt. Clara reached across the table. I need to know what this is when everything else is finished. My feelings aren't part of Edward Hayes's case. I know. Then why wait? Because when I came here, I had $3.40 and nowhere to sleep. Then your ranch needed its books repaired. Then Edward came after the land. Then we needed each other to fight him." She swallowed. "I want one season where I don't have to stay." Nathan stared at her. Then understanding came. Slowly. Completely. "You want to choose?" "Yes." He covered her hand with his. "All right." That was all. He waited. The final hearing came in March. Clara traveled with Elias Marsh and several of the affected ranchers. The room smelled of wet wool, coal smoke, and paper. Edward's attorney tried exactly what Clara expected. He asked about the letters, the promised marriage, her journey from Cheyenne, her humiliation at Red Willow Station. Then he asked whether anger at Edward Hayes had influenced her accusations. Clara looked toward the documents stacked before the territorial examiner. "The documents don't know he rejected me." The attorney paused. Clara continued. "They have dates, amounts, and signatures. Cross's correspondence supplied those signatures. Mr. Albright's records supplied dates. Holloway's cooperation showed how the bank pressure had been applied. Ruth Henderson, Margaret Price, Tom Waverly, and the Carty brothers supplied what Edward had counted on them never doing. They told their stories together. The fraudulent reassessments were overturned. Nathan's mortgage was restored to its legitimate terms. Restitution was ordered where property and money could still be recovered. Holloway lost his position and faced separate penalties. Edward faced territorial criminal proceedings for his part in the scheme. Judge Heron Pewitt never touched the case. Edward's last defense had been to make Clara Bennett the story. In the end, he had to answer the paper. Nathan was waiting at the ranch when Clara returned. She climbed from the wagon. He searched her face. "Well, it's over." Nathan closed his eyes briefly. Then he nodded. No cheering, no dramatic embrace. He carried her bag inside. Clara made coffee. For several days, neither mentioned marriage. Then a telegram arrived from Elias Marsh confirming the final property orders. Nathan brought it to Clara's office himself. She read it, folded it, placed it beside her ledger. Nathan waited. Clara stood. The irises. What? She was already reaching for her coat. At the ranch, she led him around the south side of the house. Winter had loosened its grip. Water dripped from the eaves. Mud showed through old snow. Along the wall, 6 green shoots had broken through the dark earth. Nathan stared. Then he looked at Clara. "You've been checking. Every morning for 3 weeks." Nathan laughed. A full laugh this time. Clara had never heard it before. Then he removed his hat. His face became serious. "Clara Bennett, will you marry me?" "Yes." The word came easily now. Nathan stepped closer. "I needed to know you'd still want me when you didn't need me," she whispered. His eyes stayed on hers. "I never needed you to save me." He paused. "I wanted you to stay." Clara touched his cheek. Then Nathan kissed her beside Ellen's irises. Nothing was erased by it. Not Ellen. Not the daughter Nathan had buried. Not the station platform. Not Edward's letters. Love did not ask either of them to pretend the past had never happened. It simply gave them somewhere to go after it. They married April 15th. Ruth Henderson stood beside Clara. Tom Waverly stood beside Nathan. Mrs. Geedy produced a wedding cake large enough for twice the people invited and denied having done anything excessive. Elias Marsh sent a letter from Billings. Clara read it at breakfast the next morning. Then she went to work. Her office sign still said Clara Bennett. Nathan never suggested changing it. Months later, Official word came that the railroad spur would cross Red Willow Valley. The land Edward had tried so desperately to control rose sharply in value. Nathan brought the notice into Clara's office. But the greater victory was written on other deeds. The Henderson land was theirs again. The Prices retained what Edward had nearly taken. The Cardys kept their acreage. Edward had understood land. He had understood money. What he had never understood was what happened when people who had been kept apart finally sat at the same table. The following spring, Clara went to Red Willow Station to collect documents sent from Marsh's billings office. A train pulled away while she was speaking with the agent. Steam drifted across the platform. When it cleared, Clara saw a woman sitting alone. One bag rested at her feet. No wagon waited. No family hurried toward her. Clara knew the posture. Her name was Margaret Holt. She had traveled west for a teaching position. The position had been filled 3 weeks earlier. Nobody had told her. She had almost no money left. Clara sat beside her. "You look like you could use coffee." Margaret glanced down. "I can't pay for it." "I didn't ask what you had." Margaret looked at her then. Clara told her about Red Willow, about her office, about temporary work she could offer, about a respectable room that might be available through Margaret Price. No promises beyond that. No claim on what Margaret should do afterward. Only choices. Outside, Clara's wagon waited. She picked up her documents and started toward it. Margaret remained on the platform. Clara climbed onto the driver's bench. Then she turned. There was room beside her. For one heartbeat, she saw another November. $3.40. A folded letter signed with all my heart. Snow over the mountains. A grave cowboy moving feed sacks from a wagon bench. Clara smiled. "I saved you a seat." Margaret picked up her bag. That evening, Clara drove north beneath a wide Montana sunset. The coal ranch appeared beyond the cottonwoods. New garden rows ran behind the house. Ellen's irises stood beside the south wall. Nathan sat on the porch. 2 chairs, one empty. He had not ridden into town searching for Clara. He knew she knew the road home. Clara tied the horse and climbed the steps. Nathan handed her a cup of coffee. She sat beside him. For a while, neither spoke. Cattle moved through the pasture below them. Mountains darkened against the evening sky. Somewhere near the barn, a gate creaked softly in the wind. Clara held the warm cup between her hands. Once silence had meant a cold station platform where everyone had gone home without her. Now there was an empty chair beside the man she loved. Not because nobody wanted it, because Nathan had left room for her to choose it. And she had. Maybe that was what Clara had been searching for all along. Not a man to rescue her. Not a promise written beautifully enough to make uncertainty disappear. Just someone who could stand beside her without closing the door behind her. Think about what you might have done on that cold platform with $3.40 in your pocket. One suitcase at your feet, and the future you had trusted suddenly gone. Would you have found the courage to take that first uncertain seat? And later, when life finally offered you something good, would you have been brave enough to make sure you were choosing it freely? Clara learned that a second chance does not always arrive looking grand. Sometimes it is a cup of coffee placed quietly beside your hand. A lamp moved closer so you can see your work. A man willing to wait until spring because your heart deserves time. Sometimes healing is simply discovering that love can remember what was lost without being afraid to grow again. And perhaps the people worth keeping are the ones who never demand that we stay. They simply make room beside them and trust us to choose. If this story stayed with you, tell me in the comments what Clara and Nathan's journey meant to you, and if you'd like to spend more evenings with stories of frontier love, mystery, resilience, and hearts finding their way home, you're always welcome to subscribe. There are more stories waiting down the trail.